Hi, everyone. Good afternoon and good morning and good evening, whichever part of the world you are today. Welcome to the last panel of the day at Video Stream Africa, organized by DVO Media. Our topic for today is solving connectivity and data price issues in Africa and enhancing user base. I'm Karan Torani, your moderator for today. I'm Vice President with Elara Capital. I've got over 15 years of experience in the media and entertainment space. So I'll just kind of request all the panelists to introduce themselves. Post which I'll be sharing some initial remarks, and then we can begin with the topics of discussion. So Todd, if you can quickly go ahead, please.
Hey, good morning, good afternoon, everybody. My name is Todd Lowenstein. I'm Senior Vice President of Sales and Business Development with Afrix Telecom. We're a telecom based out of Barcelona, Spain, and we have over 50 points of presence throughout the African continent. My background includes 25 plus years in the content delivery network space, as well as digital rights management and content management. And I worked in the cable TV industry before getting in the CDN space. So I'm really glad to be here. Thanks, Karan.
Lewis.
Hi, everyone. My name is Luis Manu. I'm the co-founder of Wiflix. In there, head of the commercial aspects of the business and also now day-to-day technical parts of the business as well. I have over 15 years of experience in technology, telecoms, and also in the content industry. Our platform, Wiflix, offers authentic and African content to subscribers in Africa and the diaspora at affordable price points, coupled with data, which is internet, as a bold agenda for us to democratize content in Africa. Thank you.
Rajiv.
Hi, I'm Rajiv. I'm a media and telecom consultant. I've been for 3 decades in the industry, spanning from media to media distribution, telecom, satcom, and broadband. It will be very interesting for me to hear my co-panelists and get their viewpoints and opinions. Thanks so much.
Thanks. Derek.
Hi, everyone. I'm Derek Ashong. Originally from Ghana, moved to Mauritius from LA. So I've got connections with a few people on the panel.
Yeah.
I'm the founder and CEO of a company named AMP Global Media. We do big data for media companies, help them to better understand who's watching and why. We recently launched a new platform that enables us to do some really cool things with rewarding audiences through gamification that can be leveraged not only within the platform, but via SDKs across other platforms, which basically lets us turn culture into currency for consumers. We have a specific interest and focus in how do you leverage all of that architecture to get more people online. We think that there's some really interesting things that can be done with reward mechanisms that help support advertiser-supported mobile data and make it easier for consumers in Africa to ultimately consume more content and get better internet access.
Right. Thank you. Just to share some kind of perspective around the African telecom market, if you look at the number of users today, I think 80% of the users today are on 3G and 4G. 5G is expected to ramp up, but as per industry reports and estimates, only about 4% of the population will have access to 5G. That's quite a small number, even from 5 years from now, because everything is going to head to digital in a very big way. Data consumption is going to pick up all over the world. So why these kind of low numbers in Africa? These are questions which we'll be asking in our panel today. If you look at other dynamics, clearly Africa has a huge potential in terms of the fresh addition of new subscribers on mobile internet and smartphone penetration. They are the second largest after Asia. So there's a huge scope, big potential. But why things are going to go so slow, that's a question mark. In terms of capex, there have been companies in Africa who have invested into the 5G technology. I mean, how far they are able to scale up and how things pan out, that is a big question mark from here on again. And nonetheless, of course, the entire growth of digital media is primarily dependent on data, whether you call it data speeds, data affordability. And given the kind of COVID impact all the businesses have had, the kind of economic slowdown we're going to have, definitely telecom is one of the discretionary spends in many markets in Africa. And that's also somewhat going to impact the ARPU and overall, data consumption put together. So we have a very esteemed set of panelists, who are going to take us through multiple topics, and we're going to brainstorm in terms of where the market is going on from here in Africa. I'd just like to bring Todd here in the conversation. So, Todd, I also moderated the previous panel, which clearly spoke about the advertising trends on TV and digital. And the point there was that clearly we've seen a big convergence in the growth for digital advertising spends in Africa. And the primary reasons for that was low broadband penetration, maybe the slower speeds to do it, and the affordability because data being so expensive. If you look at on a per GB basis, I think data is quite expensive in Africa versus other emerging nations like India, if you just do a comparative study. So, I mean, for example, if you can just highlight some trends here, firstly, in terms of, what is the kind of data usage trends, what is the per capita GB data consumption in a place like Africa? Because India currently we're talking about numbers of 12 GB data per month per person, which is expected to double over the next 5 years. And of course, this is because the data price being phenomenally cheap here. But what is the kind of traction there? I mean, what are the telecom companies thinking about? How are things going to shape up over there in terms of data consumption per capita?
Well, there's a tremendous amount, I can speak from the United States perspective, there's a tremendous amount of excitement about what's going on in Africa right now. One of the things that I do for our company, I mentioned we have 50 points of presence across Africa. We have things like dedicated internet access, as well as international private lease circuits. But one of the things that we're moving towards is content delivery networks. And so what I'm doing is talking to not only the cloud providers, the Azures, the Amazon Web Services, companies like that, but also talking to content delivery networks. And that's where you get large consumption of data. You get audio and video. And so you mentioned at the beginning of the conversation that most people were at 3G speeds, some 4G. I saw that Rain is the first 5G provider in Africa. When you get, as you move up in generations of wireless, you'll get faster connections, then you'll get more consumption of data, whether it's 1080p video, eventually you get to 4K, but that's years away. And that's even years away in the United States. One of the things that I show people is I showed this 5G phone that I just bought. It's very expensive for Americans. I can't imagine how expensive it would be on the average monthly salary for people in Africa or Latin America. So not only do you have the issue of not having 5G networks that are widespread, but you also have the cost of the device. And so that's incredibly expensive. Well, one of the things that I would say, Karan, that will bring lower data prices will be there will be more submarine cables that will be connecting Africa to the rest of the world. For example, the 2 Africa cable that's coming out in 2023, 2024, that's the Facebook cable, the China Mobile Telecom cable. That's going to bring lower data costs for everybody. And that will connect Africa to the rest of the world, and they'll be able to consume more content.
Right. But, just to draw this correlation and the shift. So India, what happened is after you saw Jio launching services in 2016, we saw this sharp movement from 3G to 4G. It was like a wave. Okay. And I mean, correct me if I'm wrong. I mean, the numbers really indicate that almost about 70% of your smartphone penetration today, of a number of smartphone users, is 4G led. I mean, right. So, I mean, how much time will this transition take? Because I think 3G is not good enough for video consumption of data. I mean, you need 4G speeds for driving video consumption, and 3G will primarily, serve the purpose of normal data requirements and some apps and maybe some music app requirements. But video, you need 4G. So how much time will this take? Because currently, I think Africa numbers clearly indicate out of the 85%, 80%, which I mentioned to you, a larger portion, almost about 80% of this 80% is 3G led. So how will the transition from 3G to 4G happen, first of all?
Well, you look at who's moving towards Africa in terms of content. You've got people like Apple Music, you've got Spotify now. And then you have some of the African players, Madundo, and you have Boomplay. So that's in reference to the 3G speeds, right? But as you get 4G, you'll get more consumption of video, you'll get gaming, you'll get the other applications that people use. But I actually am really bullish. I think Africa is going to leapfrog a lot of places because you don't have the level of regulation that you have in a place like US or the EU. So I think that it will go much faster than the United States has gone. I can tell you that our cellular service isn't very good here, quite honestly, and I'm in Los Angeles. So, you've got heavily densely, I see people shaking their heads. You have heavily densely populated cities like Cairo, you have Lagos, you have Nairobi. They'll be able to reach lots of people quickly using 4G technology. And 4G for most applications is pretty good. 720p video is fine over 4G.
So how
I
many
think it'll
years
go
do you
pretty
give this kind of a transition from 3G to, for example, for this 4G base to becoming a lion's share? How much time do you think would give? 2 years, 5 years? What would be the time frame in your view?
Well, 4G is already about 50% in sub-Saharan Africa, if I'm not mistaken. It was 11% in 2015. So that's quadrupled in a period of 6 years. It's just going to go faster and faster. It's also, you have to have that 4G handsets. You also have to have the ability to pay. So as more and more people are connected to the internet in Africa, net incomes, average per capita incomes will rise. They'll be able to afford more handsets. They'll be able to afford more data consumption. And so I think it'll go much faster than what we're planning right now.
Right. Thanks. Louis, let me bring you here in the conversation. So, generally, if you see 4G really satisfies the needs of video, gaming, social search, everything put together. Do you actually think 5G will be a big trigger for this entire growth in terms of video consumption, or 5G can be used for other purposes? So, just to get a sense from your end in terms of what is the importance of 5G for this entire growth into video consumption, because 4G does a good job, right?
Yeah, we know clearly. From where I sit on the OTT side, we know clearly that data forms a bigger part of the conversation on delivering quality services to our customers. In areas that we've launched, we've predominantly seen that any locations that has very powerful internet connectivity has good traction on our platform. We see surge in the number of people that browses or uses our content or stream day in and day out. So we know clearly that 5G is going to be a massive push for us, because we know definitely that so far as internet connectivity or internet penetration increases in Africa, players like us also becomes very happy on expanding our platform, putting in more money, more funding to actually help broaden the horizon on content accessibility in the whole area as a goal. One other thing that we have taken as a business owner, what some of the few things that we see as lacking in the area of content streaming or providing content to customers in Africa is such that even though when people have access to the content as a goal, it is quite very difficult for them to get internet or to get the right kind of data to stream the kind of content they've actually bought for that specific month. Literally you would have an average person consuming around 100 gigabytes of data in a month on the streaming platform. And that in an average, looking at countries that we've launched, would cost them a little over $50 a month. And that is really huge for a content access that costs an average $6 for that month. So that is actually $56 plus, the payment facilitator that they use, extra charges that could come out of there as well. So what we are basically doing on our side is also looking at a way to subsidize, to reduce the cost of access on data on one side, so that the propositions that we go throughout with our telco partners also comes in play, so that they actually come in to also reduce the cost of data on their side. So if you look at our propositions in most of the countries that we've launched, basically what we do is to subsidize. We sometimes reduce the cost of access on our platform by even up to 70-75%, just to enable people to top that one up with data and to be able to access content. So we think data accessibility is one key. Then penetration is also another thing. 5G is going to do a bigger game, but the pricing is also one bit of it that we need to have a look at.
Right. So data prices need to go down definitely, for this consumption uptake to happen. And how's the industry placed there in general? The telecom service providers, how open are they, in terms of cutting the data prices to kind of increase, this entire consumption? Is it highly consolidated? Is it fragmented? What are the telco players indicating there?
I think telco players in general are doing a lot in that. As much as there are other rules concerning, as much as they also want to see much more data consumed on their platform, people paying for the right amount, because they actually source it from one place and then they have to redistribute and sell as well. But they really contribute to that. we're currently in talks in Ghana with MTN, basically, where they are looking at, reducing. They've given us a bundle that actually reduced or has already a subsidized data proposition attached to it that goes with our content as well. So just as we come in almost 75% reduction in price, they also come in with, great affordability and access on their side. And in a way, with a couple of that, we can actually come up with a great proposition that allows people to be able to stream at affordable pricing and have the right kind of content access as well. And we've seen a lot more coming as well. We've seen the same thing in Nigeria. The telco partners we've been talking to, fully equipped with that. They're very happy with pushing that strategy because they know too well. It's not just them, it's also where they source the content from, the data from, and it's also from sometimes also the parties involved, the communication authorities, the amount of investment that they have to put in the 4G, 5G networks to come and stuff like that. So all these things actually come in there. But we think for content partners like us, we see it to be two ways. We need to subsidize our access fees, and they also comes in, the other way, subsidizing data, and then in that way, we have a great proposition for customers.
Right, right. Derek, I would like to get your perspective on the entire distribution mechanism because, you're running a company which is basically analyzing a lot of big data in terms of trends, consumption patterns. Of course, everyone you speak to, they do indicate that, telco is a big driver in terms of distribution of content, and they are the pillar, so to say, of, digital consumption and digital growth. But if you can just highlight, some kind of trends here in the telco content distribution ecosystem. I mean, how big an influence are there, and what is the future of this? Derek?
That's a great question, Karen. Thank you. So I think that the telcos are a critical part of the ecosystem and the success and the growth of the ecosystem. Right now, the telcos are in a relatively good place in the sense that they're making money off of the current data model. So they don't necessarily have a lot of incentive to innovate. So you'll hear people talk about innovation, but the pace of it is relatively slow, particularly as compared to other emerging markets like India. Part of what I think needs to happen is we need to think differently about the business models around content delivery. So for example, if you ask yourself about what are the most ubiquitous technologies in the media world, television and radio far outstrip anything digital. Why are television and radio been so successful? Because at the end of the day, you would buy the box and the content would come for free. In the mobile sector, you buy the box, which is relatively pricey in that phone. Then you have to buy the bandwidth to use it. Then you have to, buy the Netflix subscription or whatever to access content to use with that bandwidth on your expensive box. So it's not a scalable model. So what we're looking at is ways in which you can facilitate advertiser-supported data that is not tied to a specific platform, where you can earn data through your consumption patterns. Advertisers can reach you, understand you, connect with you, and you can use the data that you've earned across multiple platforms. If you are able to scale a model like that, then it means that all the different players in the value chain actually benefit, but the consumer is at the center, and we can onboard tens of millions of new people into these mobile ecosystems.
Right. And what is the future for this? I mean, in terms of aggregation, of course, as you rightly pointed out, we don't see consumers paying separately for content, separately for data. So what are the kind of initiatives that African telecom providers are right now doing, to kind of bundle them at reasonable prices, to kind of aggregate them and offer really good, compelling packs to the customers? Because that is the only way you can scale up the customer base.
So I think what we've seen in the market is you have people offering packages. They have them offering a variety of different options. But when we talk to consumers, the pricing of those options is still relatively higher compared to, the domestic consumer wallet than if you look in other places. Overall, in aggregate, Africans are paying almost 5 times more per gigabyte of mobile data than users in countries around the world, 5 times more than the global average. So at the end of the day, the very, very cost base is going to have to come down significantly in order for you to have a lot more uptick. And our position is, well, right now, when you've had this economic constraint that's been forced by the COVID crisis, the consumer's wallet is even more constrained than it was a year, 2 years ago.
At the same time, somebody wants them to buy, McDonald's instead of KFC. So if you can build advertiser supported models, the telcos can make the revenue, the consumers can get better access, and you can onboard more people into 4G plus high-speed ecosystems. And in doing so, hopefully the growth in the market will encourage innovative players to offer better priced data products.
Right, right. Rajiv, if you can share your insights, because you've been in the business in so long in India, you would have studied the entire, telco capex cycle, right from how the investments happened at the initial stage, how things transitioned to 3G, 4G, and right now where we are in terms of a large customer base. In your view, what is kind of gone wrong in Africa in terms of telco investments, and what have been the barriers for investment in telco infra for them basically being so slow? If you can just draw some correlation here in terms of India versus Africa, because both are emerging nations, but India has taken a leapfrog here. I mean, how could Africa kind of, solve the problems?
Well, Karan, it would be very unfair to compare India, which is a nation, versus Africa, which is 54 nations, right? So a lot of things which are taken centrally decisions in India, here multiple countries would have to take decision on that. Secondly, the land mass. When you look at the density of population per unit area, what about that unit area B? And you compare that between India and Africa, we are talking of a 1 is to 10 ratio, which means laying out the network is so much more difficult in a continent like Africa than it was for us in India. Uh, in terms of, and then you have a lot of inaccessible places in between. It's not like it's contiguously habitated or something. There are, when I look at the population, the total uh, customer base or the population base for Africa continent and India is more or less equal. When I look at the smartphone penetration, we are quite similar in nature. When it comes to barriers to adoption, I was looking at affordability as one thing, accessibility is one, affordability is another. So, yes, network coverage may be an issue. There might be places where there may not be a business case to put up either a high speed broadband fixed line network or a 4G, 5G network. There may not be a business case for that. You see, the Alliance for Affordable Internet, they were talking of 1 GB data for 2% of monthly income. And in most of the places that I see in Africa, the costs are much higher than that. And the funny part is that A4A is going to revise their standards now, very soon, in the next few weeks or so. Now, that could be one of the reasons where, even though it's accessible, I've noticed that half the population which can still access that network, they are within the network and they may have a connection, they are not using it because the data consumption, the cost for data consumption is so high. Now, that barrier being there, what it is also holding back is a lot of possibilities which would have been there in case the data consumption was happening. So while we are talking of media and we are talking of video and services, just imagine the social inclusion or the education inclusion that has been hampered by this COVID crisis. So while we were talking of a 5G handset, I'm saying there will be a lot of people who may not be able to get this data price right, and because of which a lot of things that could be done for the citizens as a service is not being delivered today. So once that is hampered, you are also hampering the financial inclusion. You're also hampering the digital entrepreneurship. So when Louis and Derek, uh, they have a business case, but they cannot scope it out for the whole continent because a huge part of that is not able to pay for the data prices that are there today.
Right. So, Todd, data prices is more being talked about right now, and that has been the bigger issue than affordability because definitely you're talking about $5 per 1 GB data. That is roughly the price which I heard from multiple panels, and that's huge as compared to any country, whether any country in Asia or in US or for that matter. So as per you, I mean, what is the reasonable or the attractive price point for per GB data, firstly, in a continent like Africa, in terms of pricing, which can kind of make things more affordable for the consumer? And I mean, how will these things exactly happen? I mean, which telco will actually bend first and go for the sharp cut in terms of pricing?
Well, in terms of affordability, I think it depends. Obviously, a place like Burkina Faso is going to be different than South Africa. It's tremendously different in terms of per capitas. I do know that Africans are wild about content. I have a friend here who's Nigerian. She said people will go without food as long as they can access content on their phone. So, it's a question of priorities partially. But I also think that there are ways that I think data will get cheaper in the long run. It's happened everywhere. It's happened in the US, it's happened in Asia, where I did some work, it's happened in Europe, and it's going to happen in Africa. It's only a question of supply and demand. And the supply of bandwidth over the next 4 to 5 years will be tremendous. You've got new players coming in like Starlink from Elon Musk, but that's very expensive service. It's about $99 a month, which is beyond the reach of most sub-Saharan Africans, I would think. But you've got that. You've got other technologies that are coming aboard. Plus, one of the things that is the biggest driver of the cost of 4G service and 3G service is the downstream cost for providers. So, for example, a lot of the traffic, what you don't see is a lot of the traffic is taken internationally right now. It's not local, right? So you have these very expensive international private lease circuits, and the cost on that is very expensive because the number of cables that are available is diminished. It's small. But with the 2 Africa cable, as I mentioned, the Equiana cable, which is the Google cable, that's going to lower the price of those circuits. The other thing that I think is happening is you've got internet exchanges that are being established in the large cities like Lagos. There's IXPN there. There's NAP Africa in Johannesburg. We just joined Mombasa, Asteroid IX. So these are internet exchanges where data is taken from one provider to another. Well, what does that mean for the consumer? It means lower data cost because there's no cost to really move bits from one provider to another provider. And so, there's less expense. You're not taking it what we called off-net. Off-net is taking it internationally or outside your network. You're keeping your data on net. Google, Facebook, they're dropping caching boxes in a lot of these data centers. So people can stay locally and access content. That means that those savings are hopefully passed along to the consumer. And so the cost per monthly gigabyte consumed will be less. So I think there's some really big, what I call macroeconomic changes that are happening really quickly in Africa. And I think your data prices are going to be way lower over the next 5 to 10 years for consumers.
How much lower? Would you believe that there should be a 60% dip from the current prices in general? I mean,
it's hard for me to predict that. Again, it depends on the market that you're looking at. A place
but
like
generally,
South
the
Africa,
larger markets like South Africa, Nigeria, I mean, what is the kind of correction you could expect in data prices?
yeah, I would definitely look at that. I mean, one of the things that my company is doing is we're building a cable that is servicing North Africa, for example, in each of the countries in North Africa. That's going to lower the cost of data eventually downstream to the consumers because we do business with the telcos there. So a wild prediction, yeah, 60% is not out of question. I would think it might even be even more than that. But again, it depends a lot on connections to the cables. I know that there are, I think, 37 countries that are connected to cables within continental Africa. 8 of those are connected to only one cable, and 9 are connected to 2 cables. Well, things like the 2 Africa cable and some of the fiber routes that are going across the continent will really help connect a lot of countries and will lower the cost of data. So the more connections into the continent, the lower the data prices will eventually be, and the better the benefit is to the consumer.
Right, perfect. Let's hope that happens soon, because that's going to be a big driver for data consumption and digital media, as said.
Karan,
So,
I'm sorry,
yeah,
Karan, may I add?
please.
I understand that Amazon and Microsoft are also putting up their data centers in Africa. And I don't know if it's already there or not. Besides that, there are many more data centers coming up. A lot of good work is being done by Afrix. IFC in terms of the middle mile and the first mile, and I've seen some Liquid Network, and I've seen the IFC funded C squared. So there are a lot of developments which are there, and when they come together, when the pieces fit together, there's going to be a drop for sure.
Right,
There's
right.
another issue though I'd like to raise, gentlemen. Like we had a conversation with an executive at GSMA looking at a market like Rwanda, and they were talking about how the 4G penetration is actually quite high. They've done a lot of, laid a lot of fiber optic cable. There's the access, etc. But that, let's say that the amount of 4G access is at about 90%. The actual 4G usage was like 15% or less. And I think that one of the things that needs to be considered is that consumers have developed all manner of tools and capabilities to operate in a mobile ecosystem that doesn't require 4G. So if you're in Kenya and you're using M-Pesa, you don't need a 4G phone for that. And so there's the question of how do you actually go through the process of educating consumers about the value of this mobile data, because they've been priced out of it. They've built their lives without it. I think this goes back to the point, the kind of work that Lewis is doing, and the point that Todd made about content. This is why we think that content is going to be so important, but there is a challenge here. You need to be providing very high-end, high-impact, quality, locally relevant content to really draw people into these ecosystems. At the same time, when you look at what's happening in the marketplace, the kind of money that is spent per capita on the content on the continent is relatively lower, and you see it in the production values as well. So I think that there's these other factors that come into play. One is we need to have ways of educating the public about the value of high-speed internet. But two, it can't just be, we're selling them on it because we want to sell them. There has to be real value there. And that means that there have to be other industries, particularly around the content space, that find that they have benefit in marketing and creating content that is going to draw people into these ecosystems. And our bet is that the only way that's going to happen is if you actually start building content enterprises in and out of Africa that are not just focused on the African market. We should be looking at the Indian market. We should be looking at the Southeast Asian market. We should be looking at places where the data product is not such of a problem, and where you can develop markets where it can sustain a higher value content product, so that you reach the scale in the business where you can provide a better service for African consumers who will inevitably be coming on board, but we don't really have a lot of providers that can give them content that gives a reason to come on board.
Right, very interesting pursuit, because I think content is one factor which will really drive audiences in a big way in a new ecosystem. So Lewis, you've been dealing with these players in terms of providing content partnerships, with telecom companies. I mean, how open are they for these kind of large scale content investments and content initiatives? For that matter, it would be providing an Amazon subscription free of cost for 1 year or something of that sort. I mean, how open are they for huge investments? Because in India, typically what we see here is that the telecom companies are going all out in terms of content investments, because they really want to, one, add value to their customers, and second thing is they want to retain the customers. So what's the mindset of the telecom companies when it comes to content partnerships?
As far as I know, I mean, it's really important. It's really funny we're talking about this topic right now, because I've actually been on both sides. I've worked with some telecom partners before as somebody championing innovation, products, and data, and I'm now on the other side, distributing and producing, making sure content is available for for the right kind of target market that we're actually looking at in the continent. On the telco side, when I used to be there, which is not, too far from now, and I think the same scenarios is for every single telco, is that there's one thing providing data for your people or for your customers, for your subscribers, they've been able to buy it. And there's another thing also being able to know what to use the data for, which my colleague clearly talked about. I remember way back, before we launched a service, which was actually, I think, first in West Africa, free Facebook, back in Ghana, it was really revealing to us when we actually got to know that sometimes the balance of our customers before their end of bundle expiry is as huge as ever, because it's they just feel cool buying the data. They have a 3G, 4G data on their phone, and that is it. They actually do not know what to use that for. So in effect, we actually started looking at a small cohort of customers and started pushing out sports content to them, and we saw a lot of surge in usability on our platform. When we launched free Facebook, it was massive. A lot more people got, we started educating people. We started telling people, you can upload your videos, you can do that. We started doing a lot of education on ground. So that is also on one side. Telcos in general really want to provide more services to their customers. It's not just primarily they're doing just data, voice, and some other few other stuff, let's say mobile money, but they really want to go into the other aspects of digital, digital products in general. That's why they have these innovation centers that they set up. That's why they have valued added service as a whole department that they run in core. What I've seen on my company side, Yflix, is basically our approach to most telcos has been very direct. I mean, we know it too well. I've been there. My partner has also been there. We know what the market needs. We know that there's a huge gap in the market, that people really have a lot of data, or they would have just minimal data, or they have really powerful smartphones, but do not even know what to use that for. So the education bit is there. There's a huge part in the market that is unsatisfied, that do not really know what to do when it comes with respect to data or with respect to content in general. So we come in there, what we're trying to do is to really fill the gap. The mid to low tier or mid to low income customers who are really equipped, they really know what they are doing, they have devices, and they're doing a lot more on the network. And that has been our target so far. And telcos in general has been really very happy about our propositions when we go out to talk to them. I remember when we started talking to a telco in Nigeria, and we started, bringing out our pricing factors, the things that we needed, and our bouquet of content that we had, that we wanted to provide to the region, they were super happy. They were even asking, how are you guys going to pay for your, how are you guys going to satisfy your content partners and a lot more stuff? But these are things that we have it at, we've tightened our deals and our agreements with them, and we're offering very affordable content to these people, and bringing the telcos on board so that they also subsidize data on the other side. But we know it too well that the targets that we've or the market that we've actually sized and we are attracting, it's actually niche in the form that they have a lot of data, or they might not even have knowledge about very powerful phone that they use, and we actually provided a lot of information to these telcos addressing that section of the market. And that is what they see. We exchange data. We have a huge analytical platform that we also pull out data about certain locations and areas that we feel service impact or service can be improved and stuff. So we're able to share data between ourselves and themselves. So we think as we come in and as more OTT players come in, it comes in to reshape the thinking behind what data is supposed to be used for, accessibility, and also general internet penetration and as a whole.
Right, very interesting perspective. So, firstly, how are these models worked upon? I mean, are they fixed models in terms of a fixed minimum guarantee money being paid, or are they revenue share arrangement basis the consumption patterns? I mean, how do these deals work between telco and content companies? And second question would be, clearly, I mean, of course, it's too early to talk about smart TV, OEMs, other partnerships. How are other partnerships emerging in the ecosystem versus telco, whether you call it smart TV or OEMs?
So, so number one, what we've been doing on the first part of your question is basically when we go in there, we have a direct deal with our content partners. There's a lot more partners in there. When we launched, we saw a lot of people writing to us, sending us emails and a lot more stuff like that. We have a model that actually is more like a playing field for every African film distributor or filmmaker. We've come up with a platform that stands for them. What we want to do is to help them make money on top of their normal rates, because basically what they do is people shoot very nice movies. They go to one big theater, they have a movie launch and that's it. And they have it on pen drives and other stuff and they serve it. So we actually come in to fill that gap and to help them launch their movies and also premiere those contents and stuff like that. We have a direct agreement with them. Some of them is minimum guarantees and stuff. The other, what we predominantly push is to have a revenue share. So on one side, we have a clean revenue share with our content partners. And on the other side, we have also a clean revenue share with our telco partners. That becomes, it makes it very visible and it helps the content partner make money every month. And it is way better than, you know, paying them once and say, you know what, you have this content and that's it. We have nothing to do with you anymore. As of now, we have over almost 30 content partners. These are huge ones that we've signed them up, huge, you know, amount of content served on our platform. We're even about to launch a higher premium content accessibility on top of what we built that is basically almost accessible to everyone. And number two, we don't tier. You know, some other partners or some, you know, big streaming partners will basically give you access to your mobile, access to this, access to that. We don't do that. We allow you to access everything because content is content. We don't mind if you access on your laptop, on your phone, on your TV and other stuff. So moving into the TV play, it is very interesting in Africa. The number of people, I mean, we launched initially on just mobile. So it was just, you know, on the iOS and Android devices and also on web. We have a lot more people that does things on the web. We have ideally more web users than mobile app users. People understands just going to whitelist.com to log in and watch movies than just downloading the app. The perception of most people locally think that when they download the app, it's also data consumption and a whole lot of more. When they put off their browser, that is it. It cuts the internet. There's a lot of people that switch on and switch off internet, just manage the amount of data they use on a day-to-day basis. So we've looked at that. We looked at economies of scale per country, and we understand how most people buy or consume data and internet services in the various countries that we've launched. So in that regards, we started with just the web and mobile app. On the TV side, when we started, you know, with TV, we saw a lot more people also using on TV as well. We've got people that would literally come to our support channels and say, you know, how do I do this? How would I go there to do that? And we've seen a surge in the number of people that wants to, you know, stream on TV as well. And which is really amazing, and which is a new place that we think we can actually broaden our, you know, our horizon in there and get more and get on more TVs. Currently, we're on Android TV. We'll be moving to TV OS and, you know, touch a lot of TVs in the process. But we think, you know, the region is waking up to content, and they are in love with their local content, and that is what we actually predominantly promote. So 70% African content, 30% international content.
Right, very interesting and detailed perspective. Derek, you know, since you handle so much of data and the analytical part when it comes to dealing with, you know, partners and content on digital side, can you highlight some trends here? I mean, what is the kind of transparency from the telcos and the partners end towards the content owners in terms of the content consumption, in terms of how many people watch their content? What are the kind of audience metrics? So what is the kind of arrangement there in terms of transparency and data sharing, you know, between the content owners and these partners?
This is actually a really interesting question. So I can speak to it from the perspective of how the distributors operate typically. So most of the time, if you're a content owner and you're going to a distribution platform, you're not going directly to the telecom. You're going to some service that has a deal with the telecom, right? So for example, you may be able to go to Yflix, you might go to a Netflix, you might go to an Amazon, YouTube, whatever the case may be. And one of the interesting things that happens is, you know, we were having a conversation with how do you call it, a big data executive in Silicon Valley and a producer in Hollywood, not just about the African market, but emerging markets in general. And then the Silicon Valley guy says to the Hollywood executive, he's like, well, it sounds like these guys are not getting any data in Africa. They're not getting the information in Southeast Asia. Like, what do you get when you do something in LA? And he's like, what do you mean? He's like, well, what kind of data do you get on your consumption patterns? You have a deal with Netflix. What do you get? He's like, nothing. He's like, well, I mean, but like, some like basic demographics or whatever. He's like, no, I don't get that. He's like, well, you must get something about the audience. He's like, no, we get nothing. You put a video up online, you got 30 million views, you're super happy. When you come with the next video, how do you reach the 30 million people? Answer is you can't. Because most of these platforms will tell you how many watch, they'll never tell you who they are.
Exactly.
So most people in the content industry continue to keep rebuilding their audience, with the exception of the OTT players who are capturing audience in their particular ecosystem and hopefully have better data and analytics. What we hope to see is that some of those content owners will start to give, or pardon me, those content distributors will start to give better analytics for the content owners. But that's really where our service comes in. We make it possible for the content owners to know who's watching, why are they watching, what's the nature of the consumption, who are the early adopters, who are the influencers, the tastemakers, who are, this individual's an early adopter when it comes to cricket, but they're a tastemaker when it comes to, street fashion or youth music, whatever the case may be, so that you start having a much deeper data profile of the audience member that can hopefully start to travel across platforms. That's what the SDKs are for. The trick in that regard then is, how do you protect the user privacy? And that's where the gamification and the reward elements come in, whereby data is automatically anonymized, and you as the party, the content owner that wants to understand, or the advertiser or brand sponsor, what have you, that wants to understand the audience member, you offer incentives for them to be a part of a campaign or whatever the case may be. And when they follow you, they participate on your channel, they join a campaign, now they grant you access to their data. So the user is at the center, their data and their privacy is protected, but we can give much, much deeper insight into the audience behavior than the content owners can get from most platforms.
Right. So there is a way somehow to get some solutions in place wherein the content owner also gets to know in terms of who's consuming the content, because otherwise you're just blindly making content. You don't know which content is success or a failure. So this way you can actually get it.
It goes back to what we were discussing with the education issue, right? Like, who is going to educate the consumer on the value of these content assets, of these digital platforms, et cetera? It's going to be the distributors and the content owners. It's going to be the content creators. If you get the right set of influential parties to say, like, I'm doing this cool thing on this new platform, you can get on board in this way and it's affordable, everybody will jump in. So how do you make it possible for them to do that? You have to give them better insight into who is their audience, why are they consuming, how do they communicate to which people to get more of them on board. Giving a better sort of understanding of the audience data is actually a boon to the entire ecosystem.
Absolutely. I mean, that is something which will kind of motivate the content players to make more content,
yes,
and eventually tie up with more partners and eventually drive more consumption. It's a vicious circle.
Exactly.
So I think that is how it's going to work out. Todd, just to play a devil's advocate here, I mean, what are the kind of risks you feel that something can go wrong? You did highlight some kind of solutions. You did highlight that, the Africa growth story is here to stay in terms of data. You did mention about, the correction, the prices which you're going to expect from here on. But what could go wrong in terms of this entire consumption online digital story for Africa?
Well, if you would have asked me that question more than a year ago, I would have thought a pandemic. But obviously not. It's actually been very good for data consumption, at least in Europe and the US, and I would assume in Africa. So, macroeconomic forces, obviously things like, a depression could be one thing, but it's amazing how much data is being consumed over and over, and it's increasing. One of the things we haven't really talked about is gaming, and gaming is incredibly addicting to people, and so that actually is something that is almost recession proof. If people aren't working, they're at home playing games, and so they perhaps will spend the money to to either watch content or they'll watch gaming or from a perspective of infrastructure, what can go wrong? Lots can go wrong. I've seen everything go wrong. A ship can slice through a cable, and then you've got people's internet goes down. I think I've told you I've been in this space for 25 years plus. In like 1998, half the internet in the United States was brought down over a construction site. There was a backhoe, if you know what a backhoe is, sliced a cable, one of the main cables, and then everybody went down. Amazon going down takes a lot of people down. There's a lot of content that's hosted on Amazon worldwide or Azure, so that can go wrong. This is the internet. It's not bulletproof, but when you have multiple cables, multiple paths, fewer things can go wrong when it comes to these type of things. So, again, part of it could be economic, part of it could be technical, but for the most part, data consumption keeps going up and up and up. It's insatiable. People are insatiable. There's no end to how much content that people want to access. And so, and what's also amazing is, I don't know how many of you subscribe to Netflix, but it's amazing how much content there is now on Netflix. Netflix has more content than all the Hollywood studios combined, and then some. They're doing so. As long as you're producing more and more content, there's going to be more and more demand, which will drive more and more data, which will drive prices down eventually. So I don't see many things going wrong here, actually. So, but who knows? There's always what they call a black swan event that people don't expect. And, it surprises people. The pandemic was one of those things, right? But for data consumption, it was a great thing. It turned out to be a really good thing. And, so.
Right, Ted. So you would have studied the African market in too much of a detail. I mean, if you can highlight some regulations, how friendly are the regulatory policies? Because what we are seeing around the world is that we are seeing too much of obstruction. We are seeing some kind of partial censorship, some kind of interference when it comes to social media, OTT consumption put together. I mean, how is the African market in terms of regulatory standpoint?
Who was that question for? Was that for me or for anyone
Yeah, for
else?
you, Ted. You can answer that. Or anyone else on the panel who would like to add insights on that.
I think it depends on each market. I mean, for example, you look at a market like South Africa, it's very open. You have a lot of providers. Nigeria, I think Tanzania has a good number of mobile providers, but Ethiopia, for example, has one. And it's Ethio Telecom. They're now issuing 2 licenses. So it'll become a more deregulated market. I think it really depends. Africa, I don't need to tell you, this is so big and so diverse that it really depends on the market. In terms of things like censorship, again, that depends on the market, depends on who's in power. Certain places are more open than other places in terms of regulation. And I think some places are encouraging more competition. A place like Angola has less competition. There's only 2 providers there. So there's Unitel and Movicom. So it really depends on the market. It also depends, I think, on urban versus rural. It's very hard to get. One thing we haven't really talked about is the urban versus rural divide. And that's not only in Africa, that's worldwide. The level of broadband penetration in the United States in rural places is not good. And everybody thinks, oh, the United States is technologically sophisticated. You go to places and it's really hard to get a broadband signal. So some places will have regulation that the government wants to guarantee internet access for everybody. And that includes rural places in Africa. It also includes rural places in the rest of the world. So I think it depends on the market.
Right. Rajiv, if you can add some insights there in terms of, the regulatory standpoint, how important is that for this entire Africa data story to pick up?
Oh, that's a very key issue here. You see, with 54 nations, each nation has to have a broadband plan. That's the basic thing which pushes you forward. So Derek talked about the Rwandan success story, and they started a broadband plan in 2018. It's showing results now. A lot of the nations are getting on that path today, and more than half of them are not even talking of affordability, right? So The government has a great role to play in terms of national broadband plan, spectrum allocation, right of ways, taxation and incentives, so, and citizen delivery services. When Louis talked about Wi-Fi being consumed in India, if you see a lot of that consumption of 13 GB per capita that we talk about, a lot of that is video. But what that has enabled, that video is enabled by low data prices, and the low data prices have enabled citizen services. They have enabled digital entrepreneurship. So, which means that today, uh, a digital entrepreneur does not need to go and educate too much in terms of the lack of digital skills. When I look at Africa and India, we are more or less at the same 30 plus percentage in terms of barriers to adoption. But with people being using the device for video consumption, having got used to the controls there, it's so much more easier for them to get on board for new services that come on. And Aadhaar, a system like Aadhaar, that's the identity system in India, would not have been possible. Look at the India stack, the kind of financial transactions that it enables. And it is presenceless, it is paperless, it is cashless. All of this would not have been possible without uh, the government's support for getting onto the broadband bandwagon. 54 nations, 37 coastal nations. We have there was a shortage of off-net, as Todd pointed out, connectivity, the uh, transit pairing, local data center, internet exchanges, middle mile network. A lot of that is being solved here. Last mile, yes, there are issues of pricing as well as demand and supply, all of that put together. There are nations where you may not have uh, too many competition. There would be a nation where you may not have a private sector at all. There would be a just single operator, a government operator, right? So that does not lend itself too well to the growth of the industry. So when you look at multiple nations, you will see a price which is desirable based on that 1 GB for 2% of GNI thing, and the price which is available. So there are nations where this distance is too close, easier to manage, and then there are nations where it is too wide apart, and which is costing the nation not just in terms of the revenue that comes out of the industry, but in a lot of other development areas as well.
Right, very interesting perspective. So I think just like to highlight some of the summary of the and some of the points which basically are valid,
Could
and
I say
how
one
things are
thing
going
real
to pan
quick,
out. Yeah,
Karan,
please,
before you
please,
wrap it up?
please,
I
please.
think, Rajiv, you just said something that is, I think, extremely important and cannot be overstated, right? When we're looking at these African countries which have these very high data prices, these are typically countries that are, low down on the OECD, indexes of development. And so when you're considering what's happening, it's not just that consumers don't get access to the same amount of data that other people do, or they can't afford it, or they can't be migrated into these information digital ecosystems. It means that these societies are basically hobbled in the information economy because it requires connectivity, right? And so the entire potential for economic growth, all the areas that could create that leapfrog capacity are diminished. And there's no reason to no region has a monopoly on intellect or insight or genius or innovation or creativity. And you'll find that people will tend to be more innovative about the kind of problems that are faced in their community than an outsider would be able to, because they don't have the knowledge base, don't have the experience. So if these countries were to, and it's private sector as well as public sector factors, to invest in connecting their communities, you have the potential to build an innovation economy across and between African countries. And then all of a sudden, the economic growth is not always looking at what kind of support can we get from outside, but you can look at what kind of resources can be developed and generated from within.
Right, right. If all can highlight just in about 10 seconds each, what is that one important thing or that one important point which is very important for Africa to scale up or probably become one of the larger base of mobile internet user? If I can start with you, Todd.
The lower price of data will enable the things that Derek was mentioning. I think Cross-country trade will be amazing. Collective intellect from the continent will really, really lift GDP in the area. I'm really excited about where things will go when data prices go lower in Africa.
Right, Lewis?
Yeah, for me, I think lowering data price in general would actually spring up a lot of startups, and a lot of innovation around digitization, that leads to proper channels and a lot of stuff, clean energy, a whole lot of stuff that rides on data on its own. So I think it is not just in the area of content, it's in the area of almost everything that drives general country growth and the growth in the continent itself. So I think there's a lot of things that our telco partners need to do. There's a lot of things that regulations in the various countries needs to do as well. And then sometimes also we on the other side also need to also consider in our interactions with these telcos and to help them drive the prices down, just as we're doing as Whitebooks.
Right, Rajiv?
Pricing for sure is one, whether it's A4AI or it's the moonshot project of the World Bank, everybody talks of that. The additional services, recently in the World Economic Forum, you had an Edison Alliance between Verizon, MasterCard, and 2 more members. And the point is, they said, we want to focus on healthcare, we want to focus on financial inclusion, we want to focus on education, but all of it has to ride on the data infrastructure. So pricing is one. Regulatory environment is another. The government has to take it as a priority and ensure that the right taxation, incentives, spectrum availability, right of ways are provided so that the end advantage is available to the society as a whole. That's all.
Right. Thanks. Derek?
I think we need to develop an ad-supported data model. I think that if you have the companies paying for the data, they're going to apply pressure to bring those data prices down. It's going to be good for consumers. You get more consumers in, more companies will be willing to pay for it. The telcos will make more money, and people will get access faster.
Right. So just to draw some points in terms of what's working in favor for the Africa market. One is, of course, the data prices will eventually come down, and that's something which is expected, which will drive the consumption in a very big way. Content is something which is very important, and good news is that telco is kind of opening up to pay for content. So bundling of telco and content is a good blend, and that's going to kind of improve from here on going ahead. Supply of bandwidth is something which is yet expected to pick up, and that also eventually will open up. But still, there are multiple risks, for this entire scalability factor to happen. One is, of course, the 5G devices being expensive. So, of course, 5G penetration is going to happen in a very slow and a phased manner in a country like Africa, where affordability is a major issue for 4G data as well. Population density are some of the issues which are there. Accessibility, downstream awareness, these are some major risks, I think, which the companies need to play out in case, the Africa mobile and digital story were to pick up. So at that note, I'll be signing off. Thank you so much to all of you all for taking your time out and enlightening our guests.
Esto es para darte con flow animal. Esto es para comerte este pan.